Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video. Myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I'm taking up more of your time today. It's one of those days, it's not one of those days, it's one of those weeks this week where so much is happening. And when you have a weird obsession with American politics as well as the war in Ukraine, then your life just gets full of information. And then I feel I have to regurgitate that information to you guys. So I apologize, you don't have to watch all my videos, as I always say. But I do get what Rob C is saying here. I suspect my wife will veto my choice of ATP for light evening entertainment. Probably catch this tomorrow. Well, if you do, hugely appreciated as ever. But my goodness, yes, I'm speaking to you an awful lot at the moment. I thought I'd do a live partly because I was sort of going to do one with Jonathan Think, and now I can't get hold of him. He was wanting to do one with me actually, and so that'll have to wait, I think, till next week. There's just crazy amounts happening. I have a whole video of RFK Jr. stuff to go through because I find that really interesting. His hearing today in Congress was an absolute freaking disaster. The man is so unfit for purpose. He's so unqualified to do the job he's doing. So that is like deeply fascinating. Just seeing him get absolutely lanced in those cross examinations. And I've got a whole video on American politics. Aside from that, just all the stuff that's going on there. And I even have a video on the new Green Party, Zach Plansky, who's been voted to lead the Green Party in the UK, because I find it fascinating the direction of politics they're going in, which is left-wing populism. They're moving away from the kind of sensible, embracing things like being in NATO, and now they're going back against that to take on real populist left-wing agenda. But that's to match like reform in the UK. So they're trying to be the foil to reform. I've voted for Green Party before, but I wouldn't vote for them with what they're doing now. But I understand why they're doing it, and that's what's really interesting to me. So like I've got a video that I want to do about that. So there's just so much I want to talk about, and of course everything going on in Ukraine, which is and around the world concerning Ukraine. The latest coming out from the White House or from Trump's orbit is that he had a very heated conversation with the Europeans today, and that's not looking good really for Trump putting on sanctions. I mean, I think he is just insanely weak for putting any pressure on Russia, as we'll see a little bit later. So I'm going to go through my usual bits and pieces with you. I will probably forget to change the tab over because I have to have audio. I have to do this funky thing individually with tabs, and I will get it wrong. And I'll be talking about something that you won't be able to see on the screen, and you'll have to shout at me in a live stream, but I won't be looking over there because now you're over there and I'm looking over here. So we're going to start with this. No, we're not. That's we're over there. So I'm already on the wrong thing. So yes, we're going to start with Putin. So Putin declared that Russian forces are successfully advancing on all fronts, claiming Ukraine is plugging holes and running out of reserves. He added, "We are not fighting for territory, but for the right of people living there to speak their language." So this was at the SEO. I still haven't covered what he said afterwards. So I had all the kind of meeting, and then there's a hot mic incident where he was talking with Xi Jinping about living to 150 years old, etc., etc. And then he made these comments which were pretty, I mean, that's pretty outrageous. We're not fighting for territory, they say, after 3 years of fighting for territory, 3.5 years, going on for 4 years soon, fighting for territory. And we're just fighting for the right for people living there to speak their language. It's just absolute abject nonsense, that. Then we have him saying I did not rule out a meeting with Zelensky, but is there any point in such a meeting? So he's already minimizing the chances of having a meeting, because he's effectively saying, what's the point? Why bother? if he wants, he can come to Moscow and a meeting will take place. So it looks like he's saying, I will meet with Zelensky, but he has to come to Moscow. That will never, ever, 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 ever happen. So, I mean, some might say, look, that's Putin being a chicken. Actually, I think Putin knows exactly what he's doing, and he's just stringing out the war. And unless the US, unless the Trump administration is going to hold him to account for stringing out the war, it's in his best interest to do so. Honestly, he's controlling the situation. He's completely calling the shots. We're going to go to him then saying, Ukraine is not capable of conducting a large-scale offensive. Ukraine's reserves are steadily shrinking, and its combat-ready units are prepared at only 47 to 48%. This is a critical threshold. We withdrew troops from Kyiv because the Europeans asked us to. It's just absolute nonsense. I mean, there's a picture. Yeah, that's a real request. Yeah, the Europeans asked us to. That's why we left, not because our lines of tanks and infantry fighting vehicles were absolutely blitzed. But yeah, Putin is talking abject nonsense. Now, I want to go to what I think was a pretty good analysis of what happened in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. But I'm actually, this is the rest is politics, and we have Alistair Campbell talking with Rory Stewart, and they're not going to talk about the SEO now. I've already shown you some of that analysis, but I thought this was fascinating because Alistair Campbell was at an event in Singapore with these European and Asian business leaders, so very kind of knowledgeable people in certain domains, quite highfalutin sorts of people. And he asked them some kind of straw poll questions, which I thought was interesting enough to share with you. So here is Alistair Campbell, and this took place just the other day.
So I was at an event in Singapore with people, about 500 people in the audience from the energy industries and the insurance industries, and some quite big cheeses. And there was about half and half Asian, and the rest were expat, American, British, Australian, German, whatever. And they very helpfully gave me one of those fancy polling apps that you can get instant answers, right? Now, the first thing I did, I asked them, you and I have done this before at events, and I said, hands up, this was without the app, hands up if you've mentioned the name Trump in the last 24 hours, okay? And around about 2/3, 3/4 put their hands up. I then said, this was before the Shanghai thing, hands up if you've mentioned Xi Jinping in the last 24 hours. 3 hands. I'll come back to why I think that's significant. It's basically just because he just keeps on going. He doesn't feel the need to be shouting and tweeting and all that stuff. Then said, which is, on the polling app now, which is the most powerful country in the world? USA or China? China 60, USA 40. Okay. Which country do you think will most benefit from Trump's tariffs policy? USA 19, China 81. So this is serious business people thinking, this doesn't add up. This is going to harm America more than it harms us. And this was the absolute killer for me.
And by the way, I mean, this is absolutely fascinating as an insight into some people's heads, right? There's some really bad economic data coming out today for the United States. There's a whole bunch of bad economic data. I've got a load of it to show you on my US political update. It is really interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see how Trump sells that to the public, because it's looking less and less rosy. Even some of the, going forward, like the jobs data is not good. The futures are poor. Yields are down. It's all over the economy. The US is starting to show troubles. There are canaries now dropping dead in the cages in those coal mines. So anyway, to carry on.
Which of the two superpowers do you see as the greater threat to global stability? Have a guess.
I guess you're going to say US now.
USA 79, China 21.
So you have Asian businessmen and European and Australian and other businessmen, and you ask them, who do you think is the biggest threat to global stability? The US or China? And the US overwhelmingly is voted. That's where we are at the moment. So, we can have, MAGA Americans and certain people who are supportive of Trump say, look, USA, we're great, as Trump keeps saying, we're the hottest country in the world, blah, blah, blah. But actually, generally around the world, people aren't thinking that. And you've got this move from the US being who you look up to as a safe pair of hands, that is now moving to China. So China is now seen as a more stable guiding hand in the world. That is an incredible move in terms of people's perceptions. And you're seeing this across a number of polls. Things like, I think the Pew Center polling is showing again that China is, views of China are going up and the views of the US are going down around the world. And you can have someone like me whinging all day long about Trump and whatever, but actually I am reflecting a larger perceptual malaise around the world.
Now, I just do not believe that would have been the case a year ago.
No, it's unimaginable. Because I was thinking about this on the way in to see you this morning, that it's a kind of miracle that the US, given how rich it is, given how many troops it has, given it had nuclear weapons, that it managed for 70 years to basically convince the world it wasn't, for most people, a threat to stability. That many, many countries in the world sort of understood where the US was coming from, understood roughly what the rules were, and therefore, if you're Europe, you allow yourself to be completely dependent on US security guarantees in a way that you wouldn't have accepted Chinese or Russian security guarantees. But once it flips, once America starts acting unpredictably, starts flinging bombs around the Iranian nuclear sites, starts talking about clearing out Gaza, starts talking about grabbing Greenland, starts putting 50% tariffs, starts saying to Europe, by the way, we're not providing security guarantees, you can spend 5% of your GDP on defense. Then people wake up and say, wait a second, this country is so big, so powerful, it's potentially unbelievably dangerous. What happens if the US Navy starts stopping our oil moving around? What happens if they start doing to us what they did to Russia?
And, this then fits in with what I was talking about with the boat in Venezuela. What happens when they just start unilaterally deciding to blow up boats in the Caribbean because they decide it's a drug boat and murder 11 people? They are starting to exercise some, powers more explicitly that we've not really seen of late.
What happens if Trump wakes up and thinks, oh, I've got all these lovely toys in my inbox. Tariffs is just the beginning. I can sanction you. I can invade you. I can bomb you. And then you really begin to think, well, how do we have other allies? How do we deal with this?
It's interesting how, we've got today, Tuesday, we've got this Bolsonaro trial starting in Britain.
So I'm actually going to leave that there. So it's interesting that podcast. But I just thought that was a fascinating insight into, views, perceptions of the US. And then I was talking in terms of perceptions with regard to the military parade. So China's military parade at the SEO was incredibly impressive as far as organization, conformity, masses of weapons. It was a really impressive parade if you like that kind of thing. I find it a bit dystopian personally, and a bit dictatorial. Like that's the sort of thing you would expect in fascistic regimes or totalitarian regimes. Nonetheless, it was an impressive thing. Now you can imagine that Trump looked at that and was like, that's what I wanted. I've spoke about this the other day. Trump's instructed the Pentagon to prepare for deterring Russia and China. So this was an opportunity for China to flex, right? And the question is, what is the US's response? What is Trump's response? Well, Fox News here, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, who I think is another person who's woefully inadequate for the job. He has said that Biden's weakness, of course, is always Biden's fault, brought Moscow and Beijing closer. No. Moscow and Beijing weren't brought closer by Biden. They were brought closer by Trump's activities. 100%. Like, this is absolute nonsense from Hegseth. Anyway, stressing that Trump's order is to rebuild the military and restore deterrence. So he's talking about sort of war fighters and et cetera, like, they're going to be doing X, Y, and Z. It's just worth throwing this into discussions about the Pentagon. It's restoring a portrait of Robert E. Lee, which includes a slave. So he was obviously a Confederate general. It includes a slave guiding the Confederate general's horse in the background. So the West Point Library is being restored to the West Point Library 3 years after a congressionally mandated commission ordered it removed. So it's removed because you don't want to kind of celebrate the Confederacy, the treason, really, of the Confederacy in a military establishment, and especially when it advocates, by implication, slavery. And then that's now coming back because that's war fighting, right? That's what Hegseth wants. He wants to get rid of all the woke and bring back slavery, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, that's a Pentagon sidebar. Right. Trump then, and what we're going to do, we're going to move up to what Trump has said today. So this is like the last 2 or 3 days worth of content going up to today's Coalition of the Willing meeting. And phone call, Trump on Putin said, I have no statements for Putin. This is when he met with Navritsky in the White House just the other day. He knows my position. He must make a decision. I will either be satisfied or not. If not, there will be consequences. And as Noel Reports quite rightly says, more blah, 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 blah. Quote, my relations with Putin, Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un are very good, but in a couple of weeks, I'll know how good. Well, actually, it looks like he's started to take sides today, or at least pretty much leaving it all up to Europe. It sounds like he's kind of giving up on it all a bit today. Although he did say at this meeting with Navritsky that the US would be happy enough to send some more troops into Poland. So Poland, where NATO troops are positioned. And I think he has this relationship with Poland because Navritsky is his guy. He's a MAGA kind of guy. This is right-wing populism in Poland. And he prefers that to Germany at the moment. So he's prepared to kind of support Poland by throwing some more US troops into there. What else do we have? Trump went asked when there are only expressions of asked why there are only expressions of disappointment with Putin. How do you know there are no concrete actions? So Trump says, I have no message for Putin. He knows my position. He has to make a decision. I will either be satisfied or not. If not, there will be consequences. So again, it's punting everything to 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, the long weeds, the long grass even. Trump is just completely unprepared to actually follow through on his threats. He's like, yeah, we're going to put consequences on. Yeah, nothing happens within 2 weeks, we'll do it. And as we know repetitively, he has made those threats repeatedly and repetitively. 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 50 days, 10 to 12 days, 2 weeks. All of these run out and he just says it again. It's complete meaningless twaddle. You said you're disappointed with Putin, but you haven't taken any action since taking office, says a reporter. Now, let's listen to this. This is brilliant because he's like expecting it to be ABC News or something.
You've expressed many times your frustration and disappointment with Putin, but there's no action since you took your office.
Don't you
worry that?
How do you know there's no action?
But
really?
Don't you worry?
Wait. Who are you with?
I'm with Polish radio.
Okay. How do you know there's no action? Would you say that putting secondary sanctions on India, the largest purchaser outside of China, they're almost equal? Would you say there was no action?
Now, so he doesn't like being asked tough questions. So that's why he says, who are you with? And eventually says, I think you ought to get yourself a new job. You just can't handle tough questions. But his answer there is, well, what about this for an action? I put secondary sanctions on India. But as we discussed the other day, it appears, and in fact, Alison Campbell and Rory Stewart were discussing this, and they were saying the only reason he put sanctions on India is because India, and this is New York Times reported this as well, it's because India got angry when he suggested that they nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize. We know that something else is going on there because he's not put any sanctions for Russian hydrocarbon demand on any other country, even though, say, China demands more from, they consume more Russian hydrocarbons than India. Yet he's just singled out India randomly. And then post facto, after the fact, he's said, well, that's because you are buying Russian hydrocarbons. No, it's not. It's because Modi got pissed off when you said that he should nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize. So this is an answer that I don't think is good enough.
That cost hundreds of billions of dollars to Russia. You call that no action? And I haven't done phase 2 yet or phase 3. But when you say there's no action, I think you ought to get yourself a new job, because
yeah, you got to get yourself a new job. I can't handle difficult questions. Now, Zelensky then announced, so this is again going back a couple of days, that upcoming talks with Trump on strengthening sanctions against Russia were due. So those are today. So yeah, he expressed hope that tighter sanctions would force Russian President Putin to shift toward a diplomatic solution to end the war. That's what we were all expecting. We were expecting that today. So let's see what we actually got. But before that, Zelensky went to France, met with Macron, and it was all very nice. Thank you very much. And they're getting on very well. Of course, France is in a precarious position with a government almost going to fall apart again. Rassemblement National are chomping at the bit to take power, but you also have the left as well in France, who are not particularly friendly with Ukraine. So France stands by Ukraine, says Zelensky, and we are grateful to the entire French people and personally to President Macron for such strong support for our country and France's leadership in many initiatives and coalitions. During today's meeting with President Macron, we coordinated positions ahead of the meeting of the leaders of Coalition of the Willing, again, which took place today, which will take place tomorrow, and discussed preparatory work for security guarantees. I believe that our work will bring strong security guarantees for Ukraine. We also talked about defense support for Ukraine, ensuring currently strengthening sanctions against Russia and opportunities to use frozen Russian assets. Special attention is paid to our movement towards a European Union. We appreciate France's support on this issue. So France really is a big supporter of Ukraine. Macron, like, whatever you think about Macron, he is supremely important for European support for Ukraine. Now, the lucky thing is that he is in position as a president till 2027. His government underneath him may be all over the shop, and that is, far from settled. But at least he's there for the next year plus. So that is good for Ukraine, because I do think that he is important. But if we go to, say, the left, and this is back from August 24th, I kept this for like 10 days. In less than 2 minutes, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the spiritual leader of the France Insoumise, which is the left-wing party there, denied the results in the 1991 Ukrainian independence referendum and called President Zelensky illegitimate. So you've got real issues with the left in France, and the right in France, the far left and the far right, and that is fairly typical for most places around. The thing is that the far left doesn't have much purchase in many countries. It does in France, but so, it could be that the center gets eaten away by both the far right and the far left in France. And unfortunately, Ukraine will lose out there. And now, Finland's President Stubb, and we're going to come back to Stubb a little bit later, because he did some chef's kiss trolling of Trump and the US with regard to Zelensky, and actually with Putin. Finland's President Stubb says Trump urged the US and Europe to act together on sanctions, with Russian oil and gas as the main targets. Ursula von der Leyen and Trump's advisors will discuss the plan in the next 24 hours. So he says Trump urged the US and Europe to act together. Now, this is something that we're going to discuss when we get to it in a wee while, because he's not actually wanting to work together on sanctions. He seems to want Europe to do it all. We'll get to that. Now, Macron said that President Trump and the American administration, just like us, have been very worried since the beginning of this war because of the choice of 2 EU countries that continue to buy Russian oil. And I think it's very good that it is the American administration that is talking about the need to stop this practice, because sometimes these countries make their argument that they are very close to the American administration. Now, this is majorly important. Macron has nailed this in public, and this is very good. So what you want to do is drive a wedge. If I was Macron or any European leader that's not Hungary or Slovakia, I'd want to drive a wedge between the Americans and the Hungarians, the Americans, the Trump administration and Orban, Trump administration and Fico, because they are right-wing populist governments and leaders I know that Smer in Slovakia started off as a centre-left populist party, but they're not anymore. They've gone to they're in bed with the far right and in a coalition in Slovakia, and they have adopted right-wing populist positions. So MAGA America sees these guys as their own kind, if you like. That's why Viktor Orban has been a hero for CPAC conferences, has been invited to the US to speak, was given the red carpet treatment at Mar-a-Lago, and Trump is on record saying that he's the best leader in Europe and he's the strongest leader and everyone looks up to him, blah, blah, blah. But the problem is Orban is the worst leader in Europe for Ukraine, right? And what you need to do is drive a wedge between Trump and Orban. And if Trump is annoyed that Russia is receiving a lot of money from Europe and sees Europe, what I'm guessing that Trump was told that Europe is still spending X amount of money on Russian hydrocarbons. He's like, frickin' hypocrites. I can't believe they're spending this much money on Russian hydrocarbons, before he was then told that, oh, by the way, the people who are buying most of those hydrocarbons are your mates Orban and Fico. So he'd already said the Europeans are being shooting themselves in the foot. This is crazy, blah, blah, blah. They shouldn't be sending all this money to Russia. Well, fair enough. Yeah. Who is it that's doing that? Your best mates. So then he's kind of like, I had to be angry with these guys because I was angry with Europe doing this, and it turns out it's mainly these guys. So then Macron senses, or European leaders sense, that this is an opportunity to drive a wedge, and I think you're seeing that successfully being utilized by those leaders. In fact, Zelensky talked about it as well. Macron here then says a coalition of the willing, which is a coalition of peace, has put forward with a military and political commitment the contribution of its 35 members in order to provide guarantees of peace and security to Ukraine. Today, we have 26 countries that have formally committed to deploying reassurance forces in Ukraine or to being present on its soil, at sea, or in the air. These forces are meant to guarantee peace and send a clear strategic signal. So strong words there, and hopefully coalition of willing will manifest into something tangible and achievable, but it's going to come down to the United States. Now, the Europeans proposed sending a delegation to Washington within 48 hours because this coalition of willing met today. There's been this phone call with the US. Let's get a delegation to Washington because otherwise that call is going to happen yet again. So to coordinate sanctions against Russia, but it's unclear if Trump agreed. So there's panic here because Trump needs to put sanctions on Russia. Russia keep being able to extend and protract this war and put Trump off from actually doing anything. And Europe understand this and know this. And they're getting more and more frustrated. There are some rumors that they're finally just running out of patience with Trump. I've heard, not today, actually, over the last few days, I've heard that rumor in a few places. Now, apparently today, according to Bild, the German tabloid newspaper, European leaders had a heated conversation with Trump. They do not expect him to impose new sanctions against Russia. And there you go. And there's 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. 2 week to do anything. Now, Zelensky's trying to keep it all together. A long and very detailed conversation with President Trump, said Zelensky. We discussed various options. The key to peace is to deprive the Russian war machine of money and resources. Yes, it is. That means sanctions. Is that going to happen? No, it ain't. Ukraine has suggested that the US consider a special format for protecting Ukrainian skies. So there could be some talk about a no-fly zone facilitated in some way by the US. There's been a lot of talk about that last couple of days. Obviously, we're not going to know the details of that too much. So both Bild and Axios here, Max 25 is summarizing what they are reporting today. So Trump attacked Europe during today's call. The conversation was heated. Trump shifted responsibility for putting pressure on Putin to Europe. And there you go. Trump doesn't have to do anything. This is Trump all over. So apparently Trump really doesn't like confrontation. So many analysts say he's not a fan of confrontation, and he generally only confronts people when he's in a power position. So he's very happy to bully. He will bully smaller nations and nations he seems as weaker. He doesn't see Russia as weaker, even though Russia are truly much weaker than the United States at the moment. Economically, militarily, I think politically. But he sees them as this great power. He sees the size of Russia on the map. He has that Mercator projection bias, and he thinks these guys are big. And I don't want to start putting sanctions on them because I like myself some Poots. But a Putler, he's my best mate. So he doesn't want to put sanctions on them. How does he solve that? Because he keeps saying 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 50 days, 10 to 12 days, 2 weeks. And at some point, he's got to do something. Well, his option out of doing anything is saying, how about if Europe do it all? Europe are already doing it. They've got the 18th sanctions package already in place, and they're now just about to implement the 19th. But they've admitted that they've exhausted all their opportunities to put further sanctions on Russia. Realistically, it's up to the US to now come on board and help. And the US is unwilling to do so because Trump has got no freaking balls. The man is weak sauce. He's weak sauce. So Europeans no longer expect Trump to impose sanctions against Russia. Trump accused Europeans of buying Russian oil and financing its war machine. Your best mate Orban, your best mate Fico, sort it out yourself. Ursula von der Leyen tried to object, saying that Europe had significantly reduced purchases after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Trump was reminded that only Hungary and Slovakia directly import Russian oil. Witkoff turned the tables and accused Europe of buying Russian oil from India. Yeah, but understand that India put the value on from the refining. The money is made by India, not by Russia, predominantly. Trump emphasized that Europe should put more pressure on Russia. When the conversation turned to sanctions, Europe attempted to agree on a joint approach with the American president. Europeans immediately offered to send their representatives to Washington to set up a working group on sanctions within 48 hours. It's not known whether Trump agreed. Trump told the Europeans that they should put pressure on China to give up Russian oil. Trump himself did not introduce secondary duties on China for purchasing oil from Russia, only India. After the conversation, Europeans no longer expect Trump to impose sanctions against Russia. But it's all right. I'll still sell you weapons. You can shove your weapons up your ass, as far as I'm concerned. Like, honestly, this is not cool. This is definitely not cool. So there you go. That's my opinion on that. Moving swiftly on, and I like this. This is going back to Alexander Stubb, who has done this perfect piece of trolling. So this is very clever here. So Stubb accepts, this is from, is it 2 days ago, when Zelensky went there to the Nordic and Denmark, Nordic states and Denmark, and then went off to the coalition to win it. He was met with a red carpet. He was met with the leader of Finland wearing not a suit and tie, wearing clothing similar to Zelensky. They matched each other. This is brilliant. This is saying, mate, you're okay with me. I'll wear what you wear, and I'll lay out a red carpet for you, just like Putin had a red carpet for him in Alaska, laid out by Trump and his soldiers. This is honestly just A1 symbolism here from the Finnish president. Red carpet rollout, matching outfits, not suits. It's subtle yet clear signs of respect and unity. Two strong world leaders with the same demonic terrorist neighbor. Absolutely love that. Brilliant stuff. Right. I just want you to listen to this because it will make you go freaking nuts. And why can't you go nuts? Let's go nuts.
If you think that Joe Biden was a better leader or a better man than Vladimir Putin, like, I don't even know what to say to you. That's insane. There's by no measure, did Joe Biden's country, the people he solemnly swore to help and defend, did they thrive? No, they withered. Putin, who's been there for 25 years, his country's improved. The people are happier. They like him, actually.
The war's been a little tough on Putin.
The war's, of course, it's been tough. Of course, it's been tough.
I'd be curious about public opinion today, this far into the war.
Well, actually, it's measured a lot. Yeah, look it up. And you can say, "Oh, that's all a lie." Okay, well, show me one.
Yeah.
Okay, go there.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not moving to Russia, but I mean, Putin.
Please fricking move to Russia. Just go to Russia. Go and move there and never ever come back.
Has been the most effective leader in my lifetime. I can't think of a more effective one.
He's been a very stable leader for Russia.
But why is he more evil than Joe Biden?
Yeah, well,
he murders his political opponents. I'll just leave that one there. I mean, he's indicted for a war crime as well, or two. He's also advocated sanctions, literally hundreds of thousands of war crimes in Ukraine. Hello, Jonathan Fink. You just joined us in the middle of Tucker Carlson enraging me.
Oh, that was enough to send my blood pressure rocketing. Another one for Tucker Carlson. Putin is an indicted war criminal responsible for the kidnap of at least 90,000 children, mass brainwashing. Many have been abused. Many thousands, if not tens of thousands, have undergone psychological manipulation and torture. And some, once they reach fighting age, have even been drafted into the army and brainwashed or coerced to go and fight their own people. So Putin is a monster. Let's not make any bones about that. And Tucker Carlson is not just an apologist for tyrants. He is sucking up their blood money. He is a genocidal mouthpiece himself. And I hope that one day he is indicted for enablement of genocide too.
I can't even conceptualize that. Like,
you could say, look, I don't know his religious views, but he's promoted Christianity within Russia
aggressively.
Yes, to combat liberal.
Blah 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 blah. Isn't that wonderful? Oh, isn't Putin just a wonderful work of democratic idealism and morality?
I mean, whenever you bring up the Nazis who lost the argument, but Hitler perversely, apparently liked children and animals and was vegetarian. So, evil can coexist with some potentially positive features. However, I've never seen or heard any real positive features about Putin and his personality. He seems unredeemably vile in every possible respect. I think, anything positive you may hear is either twisted, distorted, a lie, or a cover for his monstrousness.
So what I'm doing is just going through my usual tabs of geopolitical news, if you don't mind, Jonathan.
That's right.
And we'll just intersperse it with our erudite opinions and views. I speak on your behalf, of course.
That's all right. I'm not streaming, but what I might do is download it from you later, and then we can bung the whole thing up to my audience, and they get your unfiltered.
You can do whatever you like with my stuff. So a new IBRIS poll for, and I'm not going to pronounce that word. Yes, I am. Geopolitical shows 52.7% of polls now oppose Warsaw supporting Ukraine's NATO accession, up from 47.7% in 2023. Only 33.5% back it, with opposition strongest among older, rural, less educated voters and supporters of PIS, Confederation, and Razan. So these three parties, PIS is a right-wing populist party that was previously in power. They actually got the biggest vote, but they couldn't make a coalition. So there's a minority coalition of Donald Tusk's party and other parties in coalition. So they're ruling at the moment. They are pro-European. PIS is a Eurosceptic party, but they're generally in support of Ukraine because Poland, across a political spectrum, has a different opinion of Russia than, say, I don't know, maybe Viktor Orban, right, and Hungary. Although,
but they're not averse to leveraging, narratives that are beneficial to Russia, actually, when they see internal political gain. So they'll leverage historical grievance and historical memory. They'll leverage the mass strikes, which I thought were vile and immoral, that block Ukraine's border. So they will weaken their own country for political benefit. And then if you accuse them of actually acting in favor of Russia, the aggressor, they lose their tiny minds. So, I mean, it leads me, I'm planning an episode which is going to upset a lot of my friends, which is what the fuck is wrong with Poland? But there's an awful lot wrong, unfortunately.
Yeah, so interesting that you talk about the farmers there, because actually, as is often the case with many countries around the world, you get more conservative, certainly right-wing viewpoints within rural communities, and generally your urban communities will see more metropolitan areas will see a shift towards the left for all sorts of different reasons. So these views are more prevalent along the rural, less educated voters and supporters of PIS, Confederation. So Confederation and Razem, these are these really actually very right-wing parties. You had the guy that was burning Ukrainian flag, EU flags, sorry, pulling down Ukrainian flags and yeah, liberal exhibitions in town halls and whatnot. That's him from, I think he might be from Razem. There's a Confederation as well. So the fact that Nawrocki has just been in the White House with Trump, as I said earlier, is kind of representing PIS. He's going to get together and form a coalition, possibly with Confederation and Razem, or they're certainly moving closer to each other. This is all very worrying for Ukraine, and the polls are shifting to reflect that movement there, which is a real shame.
And there's a parallel move which surprised me greatly, because it seemed to me that Czechia was one of the countries that remembered most acutely what it's like to be dominated by Russia, and indeed, of course, invaded by Russia when the Prague Spring was crushed. And yet it seems that both in Poland, but especially in Czechia, Russia has been making enormous investments in informational warfare, and it is changing certain perceptions away from reductions in certain metrics for support for Ukraine, NATO, etc., but also shifting the needle domestically towards a more grievance style of politics, which favors the populists, which you mentioned. The idea that Czechia, Poland could fall, the idea that the UK could fall to Lieutenant General of the GRU, Mr. Farage, that it's deeply troubling that the informational campaigns seem to be cutting through.
Yeah, I'm super worried. I'm super worried about the UK. I could bore you for a long time about what's going on, the audience, what's going on politically in the UK.
You never bore me, Jonathan. I could sit there all night and lap it up, honestly.
Listen to my dulcet tones. Yeah, but we're lucky that there's still kind of 3 years left of our government, which is going to be support for Ukraine and stability in terms of, I think, foreign policy. But as you say, Czechia is a problem. Poland is potentially a problem as well, the direction that's going in. I think you've got French Parliament is a problem, and other places too. So there are worries, and of course you have the US. But interestingly, Hungary, actually, we might have some opportunity for a change of direction there. Although, as you can see here, Hungary and Slovakia are once again asking the EU to remove asset freezes and visa bans on 6 Russian businessmen in order to secure the rollover of the bloc's individual sanctions regime on the Kremlin. So the sanctions regime has to be renewed every 6 months.
6 months, yeah.
I think it's 6 months, isn't it?
It is 6 months, yeah. It's a real weak point. And they squeaked it through this time, but it's every time it's a worry.
And what that means is that every 6 months there's more leverage that these nations can say, well, we won't sign it unless you do this. We won't sign it unless you do that. So every 6 months, I guess, there's a weakened scenario. But that list includes Putin and Lavrov, as well as several oligarchs. So now they're just going in for like the big guns in terms of relieving sanctions. It's just absolutely incredible. I mean, the good news is that if Hungary is able to have free and fair elections, and that's a big if, because you've got an authoritarian leader or dictator wannabe in the form of Orban, who has already democratically backslid the country, and you're wondering, like, he knows that he's down in the polls by a considerable margin. Yes, they will narrow, but Peter Magyar, the opposition leader, is on course to win that election if it was held today. It's due for 2026, isn't it? So, you know, he could be in trouble, but it just depends how much he can rig the elections, even though it is in the EU.
It's not Georgia Dream, is it? I don't think he's actually ever felt the need to corrupt the system, the electoral system, to that extent, because I think he always felt he controlled it and didn't have to go that far. He's perhaps left it a little late to fully gerrymander the system, and the opposition may be more overwhelming than it's proved to be in Georgia. So this is an interesting scenario. I don't think he can get away with a wholesale election fraud. I may be proved wrong, but I suspect not. And of course, there are consequences in the EU if that is proved.
Yeah, but there are other ways that he can affect the result, though. So his control over the media, his control over education institutions and the judiciary and all these kinds of things allow him to be able to kind of soft rig it, if you like, to have undue influence over the electorate. And those are certainly worries as well. Now, you've already mentioned our best mate, Nige, who is the flavour of the moment. I did a video on Farage yesterday, a whole video on him getting excoriated in Congress. Now, I have to actually...
He got his arse handed to him, quite frankly. I watched a few of those clips. He was awful. He was, but he's just so... He's a bad communicator. He's got the populist kind of, you know, swagger and smirk, but when it comes to the details, there's nothing there. There's no substance whatsoever.
So he did, right? He got his arse handed to him when it was handed to him. But there was also a lot of other questioning that we didn't see the clips of because they didn't go viral, but where the Republicans were just softballing him questions, and he gets to then platform his grievances. So GB News was showing those kinds of clips, right?
Yes.
And in fact,
even the BBC, Telegraph, Spectator were also softballing it. They were positioning him to make him sound far less ridiculous than he did in those clips, which is horrifying.
And but he, like Jamie Raskin, who I'm a big fan of anyway, was absolutely on point. Now, I just want to point this. I mean, this is an LBC moment here, I think, with Ian Dale and some other chap here. And this picks out, actually, I think, one of the key sentences from Nigel Farage, and this is pertinent to Ukraine and to Europe and to the information wars we're involved in.
What was Mr. Farage doing in Washington?
This could happen to any American man or woman that goes to Heathrow that has said things online that the British government and British police don't like. It is a potentially big threat to tech bosses.
And there you go. Honestly, like, his job of going to the House Judiciary Committee was to advocate for tech bosses.
Yes.
That's what he's doing. It's about the regulation of the tech industry, and he is being used by your Elon Musks and your Peter Thiels of the world to go and do this so that the US puts trade pressure on the EU and the UK not to put in tech regulation and tech taxes. So I want to play that bit again because this is so freaking important.
British police
assumes
don't
remunerated
like.
it.
Yeah. So and yeah, there is evidence that he gets money from American PR firms that he hasn't declared as well, and etc. etc.
And
it is a potential.
Sorry.
And digital funds, undeclared digital funds. He's also fighting, obviously, the cap on, transparency around digital campaigning and external funding sources. So in Brexit, that way exceeded the legal mandate there. So it may not be they're necessarily directly lining his pockets, although quite possibly that as well. But he's looking for them to leverage him into Downing Street through massive investment, one would have thought.
And notice that pin he's wearing, as many people pointed out, it wasn't wearing a union flag. He's wearing a GB News pin because he's got a show on GB News. We're going to return to that in a second.
Police don't like. It is a potentially big threat to tech bosses, to many, many others. This legislation we've got will damage trade between our countries, threaten free speech across the West because of the knock-on rollout of effects of this legislation from us or from the European Union. At what point did we become North Korea? Well, I think the Irish comedy writer found that out.
Now, I just want to comment, and I was listening to Sheila Fogarty on LBC News today, actually, who was saying, quite rightly, that we've got free speech in the UK. We're not North Korea. This is just is such overreaction. And you've got the police coming out today and saying, look, we do need to look at the law on we shouldn't really be arresting someone like Graham Linehan as he turns up at the airport because of things he said about transgender on Twitter. Now, there is this discussion, like I've said previously, about incitement to violence.
Well, some of his tweets, I looked him up afterwards, and actually some of his tweets, he could say that they were tongue-in-cheek, but a plausible case can be made for incitement. But turning up with 5 armed officers, I mean, this is just such an own goal.
No,
it's pretty ludicrous.
No, see, you've been sucked in as well. Like I've seen I've seen every newspaper report this. A Guardian was reporting it today. Like arrested by 5. Like he's arrested at the airport, and all officers are armed, right?
Yeah.
So
in the airport, everyone's armed, aren't they?
Yeah.
So by default,
by default, you're an armed police officer. So, but everyone's like, he's arrested by 5 armed police officers. No, he's not. He's arrested by 5 police officers who happen to be armed because they have to be armed because they're in the Heathrow airport. So, that kind of gets to me, but it plays into the narrative, right? And it says that this is over, like this kind of North Korean idea, but it's not North Korea. Like I can say what I like you can say what you like. We've got free
frequently
speech.
do.
Yeah, it's just like absolute nonsense that you're equating the UK with North Korea now. I think it's a freaking insult. But the problem is that gets picked up by his base and gets regurgitated. And they are like free speech. And then you have Tommy Robinson on the 13th of September that's going to try and get 1 million people on a free speech rally. And you're like, what? Just
I mean, it's raising. They are the chaos. You know, they're creating narratives that the country is in chaos, but actually, they are inciting, I think, more chaos and stress than is actually there from the so-called issues they highlight. And something else that really annoys me is there's the libertarian free speech lot, and I count quite a few American friends actually, unfortunately, in that. My understanding is, though, if you look at something like the First Amendment, it doesn't cover free speech for incitement to violence and hate. So this idea that there's some universal free speech, no limits within the American Constitution is total toss as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a whole video on the free speech from a kind of philosophical point of view and looked at it, and the free speech is kind of like a bit of an incoherent mess as a like concept. No one is actually a free speech absolutist. No one.
No.
Like, not a single person on earth will say, yeah, it's fine for pornography to be on TV at 2:00 in the afternoon so my granny and my 5-year-old kid can watch it. No one says it's fine for a kid to stand up in class and then shout and swear and hurl racial invectives at the teacher for an hour so that no other kid can listen and learn. You know, we put.
Don't know what schools you've been looking at, mate. It seems to be par for the course at some of them.
We have regulation and watershed. We have detentions for children because we teach them not to do that. We try and constrain speech to be responsible. And so, no one advocates for full-on free speech and, shouting fire in a theatre and bomb on a plane and all this stuff. We have rules in place and we agree that those rules are sensible. The problem is, you've got one end here and one end there, and you have to draw a line somewhere, and it's subjective. And some people, we agree there has to be a line somewhere, but it's just where that line is. And that line is not for some people to be there and not for other people to be there. But what you generally find is that people want it to be drawn wherever it's convenient for them, but that rule applies to them, but actually not to other people, or vice versa. Do you know what I mean? So it becomes a permission to insult people when it's convenient for you to insult them.
And of course, there are many that have an angle or a grift here. So of course, if there was no direct political advantage, they're not going to defend, certain freedoms. They're not going to bring up certain cases when it is not convenient. They're not going to fight for the rights of free speech of minorities or people of minority religions. No, they're going to fight for grievance-laden arguments that are angled towards their base. So we always have to look at this and say, okay, are they doing this out of some kind of nobility and altruism, or are they doing this for sheer self-interested grift? And it's almost always the latter.
Yeah. And obviously, there are issues with this. Goose Springsteen says, look, the Linehan case is problematic as an Irish national made a post while in America on American-owned social media and is arrested based on a British complaint. It wasn't a crime where he posted it. But of course, where you are, that's a big old grey area because the person that takes offence, if you're inciting violence, if he was indeed doing that, like inciting violence against someone in the UK, then that is an offence against a person in the UK. So when
and there's no context reported, so it's comedian arrested out of the blue. The context is that he's made increasingly confrontational, and not just sort of digital online confrontational. He's had his accounts banned multiple times, popped up, redone them, committed what are thought to be violations or offences, even under Elon Musk's almost complete absence of policy. He's managed to get banned under that. And there are instances, it is alleged, that he's actually confronted people in the real world to the point where it even got physical in one instance. It is alleged. So there's a context, which is a pattern, I would say, of escalation and radicalization of this character. Now, I'm a great lover of his comedy output. I think he's a comedy genius, quite frankly. But he seems to have been radicalized.
So, he is in court on another for another case of harassment of a trans person. So Graham Linehan relentlessly posted abuse. This is today's newspaper. Abuse about trans teenager court sold. So it is a prickly one. This and also the police. What I was trying to look for is the Met Police chief, I think, today saying that the law does need looking at because we shouldn't be policing toxic online content essentially. So this isn't easy, but it's not. I also don't think that this is suddenly like the Labour parties or the Labour government's problem. This is existing laws, and if I'm correct in saying the law pre-existed the internet, so I think it's the application of
But where you get, dare I say, a technocratic non-leader. I mean, Starmer is sort of disappointing in sort of the tone and the substance. But
Starmer didn't arrest them.
He didn't arrest them, no.
But he's not. He's got nothing to do with it.
And technically, he's not supposed to, guide it. But I think, if there was genuine concern, then there could be room here for some kind of investigation, some kind of report to say, okay, these guidelines are clearly not working. Let's bring together multiple stakeholders and let's figure it out. I would have thought that a very public arrest, it's actually a deeply political kind of symbol. The police are saying, oh, we don't really want to do this. But that seems to me quite a political gesture. Surely some kind of summons, and I'm not a legal expert here, but surely some kind of summons or something would be a far more diplomatic way of holding people to account, rather than such a sort of public arraignment.
I don't know the procedure.
But I don't know the procedure,
Yeah.
And if they're coming into the country, something flags on the system, they're probably duty bound to react to it.
I presume if that's exactly what happens. So if he's flagged up on the system, the passport goes in. He's like, he's wanted for this because there's an investigation into him,
and then
the police
you have to
turn up, and then they're like,
react.
well, we've got to do this because this is the law. So it's the law that needs looking at, right? And that's what the Met are saying today, which is fair enough. You tinker around, times change. It's fair enough, but the kind of for Nigel Farage to go to the United States and moan about this to the American Congress and badmouth the UK rather than actually go, he's supposed to be in Parliament on that day. Actually, you know, stand up in Parliament and say we need to change the rules and actually put together a bill and do something about it. But just like in the European Parliament, where he didn't turn up to anything, like he had the second out of 749, he was the 748th worst attendee, and I think the other one had like died or something. Yeah. Like he was literally like one of the worst. And he's just renowned for being freaking lazy. He doesn't go to Clacton, where he's supposed to be representing his constituents. He doesn't go to surgeries. He's
delinquent MP. That's what it is. That's the word for him, delinquent. It clearly has his own motivations, which are nothing to do with the interests of his constituency there. I did hear one report that actually it is worse, and I think this was brought up in Parliament. He didn't just go and badmouth. He actually has called for tariff measures to try and pressure UK law changes. Now that's, excuse my language here, that seems to me treasonous. Yeah, I mean, I've always thought him as treacherous and treasonous, and that's
so. This is what you're going to hear from.
That's what it is.
This is what you're going to hear from Ian Dale
at Heathrow Airport.
He was effectively almost urging the American government to impose worse trading relations with the UK if we didn't get our act together on free speech. I mean, if that isn't traitorous, I don't know what is.
Absolutely. Look, that's the word, isn't it? It was treacherous to the British people. What was
So there you go. Exactly what you were saying there. And actually, we're going to go back to Ian Dale.
An absolute disgrace. And I don't say that.
And by the way, for those who don't know, Ian Dale is no liberal, right? He's a conservative-leaning host on LBC.
An absolute disgrace. And I don't say that lightly. It is unprecedented for a leader of a UK political party to go to another country and slag off his own country. And that's what he was doing in the most disgraceful way. I have concerns about some aspects of freedom of speech in this country, but I wouldn't go to a foreign committee to express them. Of course, what he admitted to say was that America has this same issue. In fact, it's far worse in America. Free speech is protected under Section 2 of the American Constitution. And yet, the American government, led by Donald Trump, now forces anybody who goes to America to say what their social media feeds are. And when your application for a visa is considered, the American embassy in the relevant country goes through your social media feed to see if you are an appropriate person to be allowed into the country. Now, that is a restriction of British freedom of speech. I'm obviously flabbergasted that Nigel Farage didn't mention that in front of this committee.
I know this one myself.
Particularly on a day when he should have been in the British Parliament scrutinising the government and asking a question in Prime Minister's questions. I think it is an outrage.
Now, I know this one personally because I've just come back from Washington, and not even for the visa, it's the visa waiver process, because the British government has an agreement with the US. You have to submit your social media profiles, or some of them. I think you're supposed to submit all of them, but I didn't submit my channel. I submitted all the others simply because I've got some rather, let's say, ripe images of Trump that are roundly mocking him, and I was a little bit worried they wouldn't allow me in the country. But no, you do have to submit those for the visa waiver process. It came back approved within about an hour of sending it, so I don't think the people in the embassy are really taking it that seriously. They're just sort of ticking the box and probably rolling their eyes, and they're quite embarrassed. But it does create a risk there, and it is an infringement of freedom of speech, and you're highly aware. As I was highly aware of going through customs, like, what if they suddenly say something? What if they ask to, see my phone? Unlock your phone. Can we see your profiles? That's what happens in Russia. So Farage comparing UK to North Korea, well, I'm sorry, there are certain instances where you can compare what's happening in parts of the US and the regime there's policy to some instances of what's been happening under Putin, quite literally.
So we're going to get back to Russia in a second. I just have two more things on this topic. And the hypocrisy of him with freedom of speech, as was brought up by Jamie Raskin, was that actually the Reform Party has not only banned a bunch of journalists at their previous party conference, last party conference, but also banned a bunch of people this party. They banned the New World magazine, and people have been banned at this party conference. And in Nottingham, the Reform Party has banned speaking to the local newspaper because they're too critical of them. And so he was challenged on this, rightly so, as you can hear outside.
BBC News, can I just ask you, you're here talking about the importance of free speech and how you think it's fading away in the UK. And so can you help us to understand why a member of your party in Nottinghamshire, Mick Barson, council leader, has banned Reform councillors and himself from talking to the local press?
Well, as you know, all the press conferences I do, I take questions from literally everybody.
Of course, why isn't Mr. Barson
Lie.
doing the
I
same?
don't know.
Lie.
I'm going to see him at the
Total
conference
lie.
this Friday and have a chat with him.
Are you happy about it?
I'm going to see him this Friday and have a chat with him. I mean,
like I said,
it depends.
It
depends. I mean, look,
It depends.
There is a situation.
Nigel,
where
were you a
can
Nazi
sue
once
press
upon a time?
if they
It
say things that are
depends.
harmful
Did you
to
sing
the-
Hitler
That's
marching
what
songs
happened.
at
They were
school?
I don't know
reported
what's
into
depends.
happening.
public
He obviously thinks they're bad actors, but I think I've got a good history of being a peacemaker in these situations.
Let me just add
No,
that
you don't.
you know that free speech isn't just about what people tweet. It's about the press asking uncomfortable questions, about holding people to account. And as you said in there,
That's
as you
accountability.
yeah, accountability. As you said in there, you are the most open person with journalists.
Mm.
So it must bother you that a member of your own party doesn't feel like that.
On Friday,
Yeah.
I'm going to see Mr. Barton and have a chat with
Can
him.
you tell us what you will say to him?
I'm going to have a little chat with him. I'll tell you afterwards.
Should he be worried?
I
Are you going to shout at him? Are you going to have a go at him?
No, I am a very good peacemaker, and I've seen all this before. I've seen, I've been in and out of politics for 30 years. I've seen these disputes before, and we need to find a solution.
And will you let the local press back in?
And
He was
yeah.
in front of the committee, Jonathan. I think you'll like this one. He was in front of the committee there, and he swore blind to rather aggressive questioning by a Democrat congressman that all journalists were allowed and all publications were allowed at his events. I happen to have had a rather booze-soaked conversation with Nigel's campaign manager of a decade, who fell out with him during the last arena-style conference. They started to do big MAGA-style events. They fell out precisely because they had allowed all sorts of journalists, including Newsnight and others, at previous conferences, but at the new-style MAGA arena format, they had an extensive list of media outlets and individual journalists that weren't allowed, including Carol Codwaller and several others. I think Emily Mellis might have been on it. But that was a point of falling out between the longtime campaign manager and Nigel. He lies in a Trumpian way at the drop of a hat. And I'm going to have this, yeah.
You also referenced this. I wrote this back in 2015. Just a reminder to people, this was on a different website. I've had to pull the media organization I wrote for back then, and the subsequent one no longer exist in the way they do. So I've had to pull like 4,000 of my articles into my own website. But this is a reminder, UKIP's Farage was a childhood racist and fascist. As you said, he sang Hitler marching songs, and literally his teacher called him a fascist. So, he started off, as many would say, he continued. But yeah, that for those who don't know about that, go and research it.
And he's a closet Putin lover as well. I mean, he knows that he can't come out and blatantly say these things. And whenever he does approach a sort of Kremlin appeasing line, it's deeply unpopular, even amongst many of his own supporters. I know people who support him who are extremely pro-Ukrainian. They don't see the distance, unfortunately. But it wouldn't go down well if he made appeasing statements. However, if he was to come into power, sorry, I just headbutted my microphone. If he was to come into power, he wouldn't necessarily have to be as overtly pro-Putin as Trump is, but he can still withdraw British support from Ukraine and cause a tremendous amount of damage.
And the last thing I'll say on this topic, so this is all connected to kind of raise the colours, hashtag raise the colours, raise the flags, people going and painting roundabouts, lifting up flags,
including the Danish one.
Yes, yeah, that's brilliant. So the Vikings are coming back. Someone got the colours of the England flag the wrong way around and put a white cross in a red flag, and then it's like painted out on a roundabout. It's like it's a Danish flag.
You can't make that up, really, can you?
And two cases of England being spelt wrong. Like seriously, you can't spell England right? Oh my goodness. Anyway, just the sheer. Of course, this was going to happen. The sheer hypocrisy here. So an organizer of a campaign to fly England flags was previously jailed for a bid to smuggle illegal immigrants, which is absolutely deliciously hypocritical. Like, yeah, get rid of these immigrants, stop the boats. Oh, you've actually smuggled, you've tried to smuggle immigrants in. Lee Twamley was described as a pretend patriot after details of his past emerged. There you go. That's come and bit him on the arse.
Unfortunately, there's another Trumpian factor. I'd like to have your views on this, because we point all this stuff out, and unfortunately we're falling back into the sort of the whole MAGA thing, which is this is obvious for us, and the consequences actually feel obvious. You know, I can almost in my mind imagine the chaos and international humiliation, but also the internal sort of chaos and descending into populist nonsense if he was to get in. We can plot all that out, and we think that people will see it, but they don't, and they won't. And the media, by and large, are either turning a blind eye to it because it's not in their interests to really focus on it and alienate their audiences, or it's the process of sort of normalization that we saw under Trump. So I fear that our perspective, which we think of as being supremely rational, is not going to be shared by enough people.
100% agree. 100% agree. And this is a really big worry for me. You know, is this classist? I don't know. I think the working class are going to be particularly attracted to his rhetoric, which is a kind of simplistic narrative that seeks to answer very complex problems like immigration with very simplistic solutions that are possibly unworkable.
I'm going to disappoint you here. It's not just a working class problem.
I know it's not just, but it will predominantly, it will be driven by the working class. As in, that's what you can see.
I don't know. No, I'm going to take issue there.
So let me finish my point. So, like when you look at the flag stuff, that is being driven largely by the working class, and that's what I mean. And that's populism, where you drive it from the bottom up. And the working class is going to be driving that. You look at where reform are taking hold. Well, pretty much everywhere. But these are low information voters. Yeah. Now, I'm going to add. Sorry, I do need to flesh this out a bit, because what I think is happening in the UK is some parts of the working class are not as politically engaged as they used to be in a high information sense. So with the deunionization of the country, and now, so when you used to have the working class being highly unionized, they would be politically engaged and politically energized, because they would be there would be members of unions, and they would be striving for equality and workers' rights. With a mass deunionization over the last 50 years plus, you have probably 40 years, you are getting a disengagement with politics from many aspects of the working class. So the old Labour strongholds of the northern cities that were working class strongholds of political engagement, that political engagement is shifting from being obsessed with Labour, and I don't mean small L Labour, with Labour law and workers' rights, and moving on to just culture wars narratives and low information politicization. So actually, I think, but on top of that, reform also have an appeal that goes much, your Nadine Dorrises of the world, and Jacob Rees-Moggs and blah blah blah. So
unfortunately, there's another contingent which we also have to worry about, and that is those who wouldn't admit in polite company to voting for Farage, or they'd only talk about it when they're amongst people who will signal in some way. I don't know if they have some Masonic signal or whatever, but I think there is a sizable chunk of silent voters who will be appalled by the thuggish behavior of the lowest common denominator you've talked to, who have nothing in common with unionized working class, but who will predominantly be living in, say, sort of home counties in Southeast. They will be the silent voters, the protest vote, or those who, for various reasons, believe that Farage's populist messages are going to deliver some kind of solution to problems that they don't see the media or mainstream parties actually addressing. And they won't have necessarily a working class background, or at least, their parents might have been, but they won't. They'll come from a service background. I say this because I know people like this, and they're very nice people, and they are voting for what they think are altruistic reasons. They are relatively well read in history as well, but what they don't see is the link between Farage and the history that they understand of populist movements. This is the disconnect here, and unfortunately, I think there's normalization of media that are going to prevent people from making those historical connections and seeing the analogies there. And there's going to be mass normalization of Farage and all his fringe lunacy, all the impact of the considerable damage he will cause and already has caused, is just not going to be highlighted or challenged.
Yeah, and just a final thing on Farage. So, as I mentioned earlier, I foreshadowed this. He was wearing a GB News pin, and actually, it turns out he was there for the free speech thing in the House Judiciary Committee. He was actually, I think, he missed giving a speech at a Conservative conference. He was supposed to be there, but he got there too late. And he was wearing a GB News pin because actually it seems really the main reason he was there was to launch a GB News show. He is a presenter on GB News, which I think is highly problematic to have the leader of a political party having a show on a broadcast news channel in the UK. I think the regulators should be onto that. That wouldn't be allowed. He wouldn't be allowed to do that on the BBC, I'm pretty sure.
Crosses a real line, doesn't it? I mean, think of Lineker just expressing a sports presenter expressing a relatively normal political view. Oh, you're out.
Yeah, Gaza. He said something about
he said something about
Palestinians,
Gaza, and he's out. This is, you see, this is the same kind of Trumpian impunity, that the rules that apply to everybody else don't seem to apply to him. He's Teflon in some sense. There's no accountability for the legion of errors and damage that he's caused. He's a wrecking ball, and yet he's enabled by all sorts of institutions and individuals.
So as we kind of meander towards the end of my stimulus here, we're going to go back to the US and connections to Russia. And if you I cast your mind back what seems like 15 years now to when Elon Musk was at the center of the US government and was doing his Doge thing and gutting different departments. And I said at the time that really the main reason he's doing that, getting his people into each department, wasn't to make savings. In fact, we know now that they didn't save any money, basically.
No.
It was all completely pointless from a cost-saving point of view. Although they did manage to sack a load of people and cause people real heartache.
Yeah.
What he was really doing was exfiltrating data. And this is all about getting data for AI, and so that data can be utilized by people like Palantir, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Deeply, deeply worrying. Well, it turns out that there's been a whistleblower account of what actually happened, and it's all to do with Big Balls. So Big Balls was this young guy, that was his kind of online name, young guy that came in and was doing this, right? So Russians had access to our government computers through non-secured Doge access, according to a whistleblower. This is bad, but with the whole everything else that's going on in the American political scene, this kind of went under the radar to a large degree, and it shouldn't have done. I mean, yes, Washington Post ran this story. Social Security official says Doge compromised Americans' data. Chief Data Officer Charles Borge said sensitive data was uploaded to a digital cloud, risking the security of critical personnel information for more than 300 million people. There was a possibility that 300 million people might have to get new Social Security numbers. as their personal information was compromised. That's almost the entire US population. I mean, imagine that had happened under the Biden administration. Like Fox News would have gone insane.
They'd have lost their minds, yeah.
So Joshua Equal here says it's impossible to overstate how big of a deal this is. In a normal world, there would be impeachments, investigations, and prison sentences. So the whistleblower report from SSA's chief data officer is insane. Everybody should read it. Without any means of tracing access or use, Big Balls uploaded America's SSN, social security numbers, date of birth, health information, and more onto. And by the way, this includes all of you Americans that are watching this right now. Whether you know this or not, your information has been out there possibly for the Russians to take, and more, and into an unauthorized cloud environment. And every American could need a new SSN. Who did this? Well, remember Ed Big Balls Korstein, the teenager who worked tech ops for Elon Musk's Doge project. He is now under FBI investigation for data theft. So he was the same 19-year-old who was linked to a cybercrime ring earlier this year. So you've taken a guy that was linked to a cybercrime ring and you put him in as your main guy in Doge. And then lo and behold, all of the data was exfiltrated and sent up to an insecure cloud. He's now accused of stealing federal data. A reminder that Big Balls is, says Adam Cochran, one, grandson of a former KGB agent, Valery Martinov. Wow, so there's a connection. Working for two people who have Russian collusion ties, frequently making mistakes uploading massive amounts of private US data to insecure servers. Totally nothing to see here though. Absolutely incredible stuff. This, and then as Angry Staffer says, I hope people realize how absolutely effed this situation is. This isn't normal. People are resigning all over the place. Because the government is mishandling our data, ruining our public health services, and generally making America less safe. Then we hear that the Social Security's chief data officer, Charles Borge, had subsequently resigned now. He's resigned 3 days after submitting a whistleblower complaint that alleged members of Doge had uploaded the confidential personal information of hundreds of millions of Americans to an insecure cloud server. So he's like obviously feeling unsafe or unwelcome, and then that was the end of him. Honestly, if America wasn't going so nuts with everything else, this would be like a 2-week, 3-week news piece. This should be one of the biggest bits of news. It is huge, and yet this barely lasted a day. And I wondered, I mean, were you aware of this, Jonathan?
Yes. I'd immersed myself in some really lengthy articles written, I don't remember where it was, but by a tech guy who was just going through the ins and outs of the systems that you'd have to hack and the ways you'd have to do it, and the clear intentionality behind it, as well as the fact that it is deeply unlawful, deeply unconstitutional, and saying what you said, why isn't there a monumental scandal about this? Because it is data theft on an extraordinary scale, historic scale, and yet has barely achieved a blip, as it were, in the news cycle. It's also, if you think about electoral targeting, not only can you use those data for nefarious criminal purposes, you can also use it for highly effective micro-targeting, which is part of the overall attempts to gerrymander and ensure that the US doesn't have a fair and level playing field for future elections. Well, that data is an essential part of that.
Absolutely. I also want to point this out. This has kind of gone a little bit under the radar. I mean, some people have been talking about this. People have reached out to me and said, what are you saying about this? This was on Trump's Truth Social. I can't remember when it was now, like maybe 3 or 4 days ago. What's going on here? So he's got a picture. The world will soon understand. Nothing can stop what is coming.
What's he talking about?
Absolute craziness there. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that one in there. Just for those who don't know Scruffy Tales, he does good mapping updates. Things are potentially looking quite positive. This is completely changing the subject now. things are looking quite positive around Pokrovsk, possibly for the Ukrainians, as they may be surrounding some peeps there. This is his latest video. Does detail that. I'm going to show you that here. A disaster for Russia, cut off and isolated. So you can go and check that out. So maybe some good news there from the front line, which would be good.
I just did an episode on that this evening, actually. I did a little news summary, published it as we were talking, looking at the ebbs and flows. And I wonder what you think of this idea. I mean, we know that Ukraine's victories are not really given the sort of coverage we think they deserve. But if we think about it logically, both sides have maximalist goals. The Russian ones are completely delusional. The Ukrainian ones are unachievable, but just. But if you look at the minimum requirements for the year, all Ukraine has to do in order to achieve a success is hold the line for another year, prevent Russia from taking swathes of its territory. That ought to be counted as a success, and indeed it is a success. Putin, however, cannot classify small incremental gains as success. He needs really big chunks of land to be taken in order to spin that as a success for his Z patriot community. So if we look at all the ebbs and flows of territory exchange this year and the overall loss, one can say that Ukraine has scored a win by holding the invader at bay, and Russia has definitely not scored a win, and their much-touted summer offensives have not achieved the aspirations which Putin had for them. And indeed in Sumy, they've been pushed back. And now, as you say, Pokrovsk hasn't fallen, and they're starting to be pushed back there. They've gained territory in Dobropilya and places, but you have to countenance what Russia has done this year as an utter failure.
I actually agree completely with you, Jonathan, which you would be pleased to know. Sumy has been...
Especially as you're more knowledgeable on these things than I am, so that's a relief.
Well, I mean, Sumy has been a failure, right? Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi said that Sumy was a failure, and the Russians have pulled out of there, broadly speaking. And they have pulled those troops from Sumy into the Pokrovsk region and troops from Kherson into the Pokrovsk region. Now, there are some Europeans are saying this, as according to Bloomberg, that there are troops amassing in Pokrovsk to do some massive counter that may take Konstantinivka, may go on to Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and obviously take Pokrovsk. But actually, really? I mean,
really?
Like,
I mean, it's very improbable based on what we've seen the last 2 years.
I mean, what I've noticed a pattern, and I said this morning in my Hits and Losses video, that the Ukrainians are actually being very successful at hitting command posts at the moment. And I don't know whether there's a selection bias with the sorts of sources I look at, but I'm seeing a lot of guided glide bombs smack into buildings that hold quite a lot of commanders. We saw just in 1 week, we had 8 FSB officers dying up in Belgorod in one hit, in one strike. You had 17 officers and 1 soldier taken out in another strike somewhere else. You had another bunch of officers taken out, an unknown number, another bunch of officers. Then you had like claims about command nodes being hit here, there. There's another one that I'm going to show tomorrow, one that I showed this morning. I think Ukraine are using their resources really well to try and take out command nodes that then cut off, like Koronovo was the other one where the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade operating up in the Kursk region and down into Sumy were beheaded. They lost their number 1 and number 2, didn't they? The deputy of the Navy was killed there. Like just a massive hit on officers and all sorts. And I think the Ukraine are trying to stop the Russians without having to meet them on the battlefield. That everything that Ukraine needs to do needs to be done from a distance. And that's why I said this at the beginning of the war. They need to fight with missiles and drones and artillery and HIMARS and, you know, so on and so forth, because you don't lose any Ukrainian soldiers doing that.
Yeah.
As soon as you try and fight them as they're charging at you, you're in trouble.
And this, unfortunately, we do know that there are remnants, extensive remnants of Soviet thinking who are, you know, trying to fight a Soviet war and making mistakes and causing extraordinary and in some instances preventable losses on the Ukrainian side. But we also see positive developments. Now, we haven't talked since the Flamingo story came up. Do you think the momentum is now given it's a war of attrition and it's a war as much as it is of will and armor on the battlefield, it's also, as General Ben Hodges would put it, it's a clash of industries and logistics. And it
100%.
seems that the logistics and the industries, when you combine Europe's rearmament with Ukraine's very high-end development of things like Flamingo, this momentum is moving towards Ukraine more than it is moving to Russia.
So I agree that it's a game of attrition chicken. So it's who can lose the fewest people over the longest amount of time. I also think there are different theories as to who has time on their side. So some people claim that Russia have time on their side and they're playing for time. The Western countries that get bored and stop supporting Ukraine, yada, yada, yada. But that's true. But I also think Russia don't have that much time because the economy is crumbling and it's attrition chicken. So if Ukraine can make sure the ratios are still advantageous for them, then actually time can benefit them because you are starting to see their own indigenous production of cruise missiles in the form of Long Neptune and Flamingos. But then we heard today that Firepoint, who've made the FP1 and the FP5, the FP1 is this long-range drone that they're starting to use more and more. The FP5 is the Flamingo. They've got the FP7 and the FP9, which are ballistic missiles that they're trying to get online. You've got apparently Antonov involved in making, I think, a cruise missile. You have the Firepoint making solid rocket fuel in Denmark with the Danish. So you are starting to see this missile industry finally kick in after 2.5 years of me saying that they need cruise missiles, they need ballistic missiles, they need cruise missiles, they need ballistic missiles. Mm-hmm. They didn't get them from the West. I suppose they were holding out maybe to try and get them from the West. It does take time to manufacture, to innovate, to design and manufacture this stuff, but they're getting there now. And if they can at scale produce missiles, if they can start producing more missiles than the Russians are able to produce, then suddenly the momentum does indeed shift.
And possibly with greater accuracy and combined with more strategic targeting, because Russia's taking out apartment blocks and it's tragic and it's appalling and it's a war crime. But does it really erode Ukraine's ability to fight? Well, it really doesn't in any respect. Whereas if these scarce resources used by Ukraine to take out the entirety of the dual use, energy logistics and hub of Russia, it's going to have a far more strategic impact on Russia's war effort. And the interesting thing I think we should watch, and I did a couple of episodes recently, one with Ben Hodges, where I called it the Siege of Moscow. I think this is where, if Ukraine's going to win, this is where it needs to go. It needs to start cutting off the energy resources to Russia. And that might include starting to cut into civilian networks as well. And there's this extraordinary place called the Yamal Cross, where the majority of gas is transited from where it is sourced right up in Russia's far north. And there's this huge concentration of pipelines. Now that's
I almost
an
reported on that the other
extraordinary
day,
target.
yeah.
I mean, it would be counted as a
exactly
war crime. I mean, it would be a war crime, but in a fight for existential existence,
Well,
Moscow
it wouldn't
is
necessarily
very
be a war
vulnerable.
crime. So no, that's not immediately true, actually.
Is
So
it not?
energy,
Okay.
and no, energy. It's a bit of a grey area, but actually, in the books, energy infrastructure can be a legitimate target. So it can be a bit of a grey area, but actually, I think war law people would probably side on the fact that you are able to strike at energy infrastructure.
If you did it at the height of winter with the express purpose, of course, of cutting off the energy supply
for
in cold
civilians.
weather to tens of millions of people, I think you could probably make the case that
you're absolutely right.
And that would be the impact. That would be the impact if the timing was chosen like that. But it does show that Moscow is extremely vulnerable, and there are still plenty of dual-use energy sites and logistics which will still have an impact on civilians, but they could be fully justified in the war context. I think we're going to see a lot more of that stuff happening. And screw Trump. I mean, I don't think Ukraine's going to listen to him anymore. Why? What's the incentive?
I I just want to throw in these I have lined up. This is just some of the stuff I got lined up for my hits and losses. But just I was talking to you about like concentrated, not concentrated. There's a trend of or a pattern of precise strikes that are going on at the moment with the Ukrainians. So just randomly, here are 5 things in a row that I had lined in this row. So but it does support what I'm saying. So number 1, operators on the ground filmed the moment Ukrainian aviation struck a Russian base used by assault groups and drone operators with precision GBU-39 bombs, so those are guided glide bombs. Next one, a MiG-29 struck an AASM Hammer bomb, that's a guided glide bomb, at a Russian command post in occupied Oleshki. And then the next one, in occupied Seledove, a Russian base is also used for ammunition storage. That's been destroyed, and the guy complaining about that there, and it's behind that base has been destroyed. Here's another base, a smaller base, wiping out an artillery position, but so this is just an artillery position. But similar pictures, I've shown loads of videos of bases and dugouts and stuff in the Oleshki Sand sort of area being routinely hit, and big fires going on in the forest. They are doing precision strikes there. Here we have Russian soldiers are once again complaining and asking for help. Everything burned down again. Literally everything is gone. They were left with nothing but their underwear. Such a tough situation. So another sort of precision strike going on there. And then this evidence is mounting, showing that the Ukrainian SEAD campaign, so SEAD campaign is a suppression of enemy air defense. This is where the Ukrainians have been, particularly in Crimea, taking out radars. Now they've been taking, well, we hear about it from this. So they've gathered success. First, Ukrainian Air Force resumed Bayraktar mail strike mission. So the Bayraktar drones are starting. These are the drones that were used a lot at the beginning of the war, but they then actually start getting shot down quite a lot. The Russians learned how to deal with them. So then they've been used more and more as reconnaissance drones over the Black Sea. But now you're starting to see them being used again to have missiles on and fire at certain targets in and around the Black Sea. Still back and around. You wouldn't use them over front lines because they're too vulnerable. But second, strike missions in Crimea are also striking civilian radars, which were also participating in giving Russian air defense an air picture while being lower priority targets. So you've seen these fixed domes that have been struck in Crimea over the last basically 2-3 weeks. These kind of domes that you see on the screen there, a whole host of those have just been hit. Another 2 were hit this morning or last night. And 1 was hit the day before, and then another one may have been hit as well. So that's 4 over the last couple of days, and then a bunch. Look, as you can see here, several hit just in this one Primari video. Third, now strike missions are targeting radar installations deeper into Russian territory. Those are the ones I was just talking about. Hits have been recorded, but their exact outcome remains to be seen. Continued degradation of Russian air defense could be very detrimental to the Russian forces in South Kherson. If properly equipped, targeting pods, both F-16s and Mirage 2000 could conduct close air support against Russians in this area. In this case, more classic paveway 2, 3, and JDAMs would completely turn into shambles, both logistic rear and frontline troops on the Kherson front. Okay, so just very quickly to translate that. So the Ukrainians are degrading Russian air defenses massively. We saw 2 S-300 launchers and a radar were taken out in this morning's hits and losses video. I evidenced that. The whole host of air defense has been taken out around Crimea. The question is, why are the Ukrainians doing this? Is it so they can? It's got to be for a reason. Yes, it's great just in general, but the reason you're going to take those radars and air defenses out is so that you can use planes closer to wherever you're shooting at. So it's closer to wherever you're targeting. So that's Crimea and Kherson. So could you use planes to do close air support for the troops in Kherson to hit those drone operators that are doing the human safaris around the city of Kherson? Can you then start envisaging planes being used closer to Crimea to start striking things in Crimea? You would see a momentum shift. And this is where I get rather positive, because I think Ukraine have been systematic in what they are taking out. And the evidence is there. This isn't just like me pulling stuff out of my arse. I'm showing these videos on a morning by morning basis. And the Ukrainians are systematically having an effect with their strikes over the last few months.
Yeah. And it's a clear strategic, and I like the way they move from, one week it's energy infrastructure, and then just as Russia's trying to, reposition air defense or panic in that direction, they'll go and start systematically hitting another class of targets. So I think they're really disbalancing Russia and its ability to respond to these.
Yes. So you know, there are, as with the whole of this war, Jonathan, I am up and down like a yo-yo. Sometimes I feel really positive. Sometimes I'm like, and I was starting to feel a bit bad again. Now I'm feeling good in terms of weapons. I'm feeling bad about Trump and the US support. I'm feeling bad about the SEO and those countries getting a bit closer. I'm worried that China is more overtly helping Russia, and there's more and more evidence of that. I do worry about the Shahed drone manufacturing. That still is an issue. I think they hit the Shahed supply chain, and you had a few weeks, maybe a month, of the Russians having far fewer attacks, but now they're back up to huge waves of Shaheds. That worries me, but there's a lot to be, I think, hopeful for with the Ukrainians as well. They just don't have the troops. They just don't have the sheer numbers of people. That is and always has been their issue.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm going to do some thanks really quickly. I know you're probably very tired. Kevin Force, thank you, matey. Really appreciate that. You are a legend in your own underwear. Julian Rossiter, thank you for your support, matey. There is a bill, alas, with only 3 sponsors to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terror. Yes. And I think this was Lindsey Graham was going to put that forward, so maybe that's his. That could potentially do more damage to the Russian economy than all the sanctions imposed so far. This is not wrong. So when you are designated a state sponsor, it really affects how you are able to receive goods and stuff. And yeah, that is bigger than people might think it is. It's not just a label. So thank you, Julian, for the super chat. Really appreciate that. And that is something to watch out for, but I doubt, you know, knowing what Congress is like at the moment, it will get through. Have you seen, Goose, and thanks for this, Goose, have you been following the looming crisis in the French National Assembly? Not close enough, but I have referenced it several times in this video. There's a vote of confidence next week, and the Rassemblement National are likely to gain many seats. Can they gain seats from that? Like, surely you'd need to go have an election to gain seats. But this could obstruct the Le Pen trial. So Le Pen is at the moment looking like she's not going to be able to run for president in 2027 because she is being indicted for campaign financing violations and whatnot. But the whole movement towards populist right there is definitely a worry, Goose. It is a real worry. A worst case scenario is that RN could make a coalition with the Republicans and they could potentially slow down the Le Pen trial by obstruction. I believe Le Pen can legally run in 27 without a verdict. Yeah, I'd have to look into the details of that, but hopefully the Republicans won't go into coalition. I don't think they will, but things may have changed.
Isn't it an interesting question, Jonathan, that if there wasn't Russian support for digital campaigns, for tactical and strategic support for all of these far-right parties, amplification of their messages, if none of that existed, would we be seeing this entire trend towards the populist right?
No.
At all.
The internet, honestly, is the internet is responsible for the entirety of the rise of far right populism. 100%.
And our refusal to regulate it, monitor it, and keep foreign investment, illegal investment at scale.
And that's why Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, honestly, it's a bigger problem than people think. But one of the biggest issues for me is Elon Musk and Peter Thiel being at the heart of the American administration and then being at the heart of trying to derail EU regulation and getting Nigel Farage over to the House Judiciary Committee to be their guy, their British guy in America. And he is trying to he said it, the tech bosses, he said it. He told you in his answer that this will be bad news for tech bosses. That's who he's advocating for. So yeah, absolutely. They are tech authoritarians, and that is a technical term. That's not just me. They are literally tech authoritarians. You go and look up tech fascism, tech authoritarianism. You look up people like Curtis Yarvin, Mark Andreessen, all these people.
I mean, Thiel and Musk actually loathe each other, which is quite amusing. And they've said some curiously insightful things about each other. I mean, when they're insulting each other. But as you say, there is an alignment there. But Thiel makes Musk almost look sane. I mean, Thiel is off the charts, sort of loon.
He's like, it's the end of liberalism, tech democracy. He wants democracy to basically, it's the end of democracy. It should be tech companies that are governing.
Yes.
And that's what he wants. So, you know, if you believe in democracy, you don't want Peter Thiel anywhere near your government. But Peter Thiel is getting involved with the Reform UK. Peter Thiel is getting involved. There were rumours that he was writing the budget for them. So this is part of his world domination tour, 2025 to 2026. So Goose Springsteen then walks that back. So that's absolutely correct. I think she can't run in 2027. Sorry, I just looked it up and my understanding was wrong. Le Pen's ban is present until her appeal is resolved. It will still be a big crisis for Macron if the Assembly goes further towards Rassemblement National. And then we've already talked about the Linehan case. And by the way, thank you very much, Goose. Always very generous in your super chats. I think the political inertia is such that all reform need to win in 2029 is for Labour to fail or be seen to fail on the economy and or immigration. And I think that's highly likely to happen. I was listening to some very interesting debate today because Nick Clegg, the former Deputy Prime Minister, has come out and said it's going to be about the economy. You might think it's about immigration, but it's going to be about the economy. And I think it probably will be, because now if we were 2029 now, it will be about immigration. But Labour have a couple of years to try and get hold of immigration. And if they can vaguely succeed in doing that, it'll be the economy. But some are saying that the economic woes are what are underwriting the immigration woes. Because if you're not happy with your law, and if you think you are not as comfortable as you should be, you're going to be looking at scapegoats for that. And you're going to be looking and blaming immigrants and boat people for coming and stealing your...
You're not going to blame Brexit, which has degraded the economy. You're not going to blame decades of underinvestment in education by... I find this extraordinary. You know, you break something. It's the old meme, isn't it, of the guy sticking the stick between some bike spokes. You know, oops, and knocking himself off his own bike. Farage has done almost irreparable damage to this country's economy, its international standing, and has directly contributed to an impoverishment. But that is going to create political blowback that will then work in his favour. I find that grotesque.
Problem for Labour, just very quickly, problem for Labour, that if Jeremy Corbyn's party gains any sort of traction, then you've got the Labour vote being split completely, with the far left going to Jeremy Corbyn or Green Party. They have some kind of either formal or informal alliance, which is looking more and more likely, as Zach Polanski, the new leader of the Green Party, is somewhat aligned to Jeremy Corbyn. So the Green Party are now going full on left-wing populism. That will then split Labour. Labour will be then, if they don't go to the left enough, they will lose the left. And if they go too far, if they go too far to the right, they'll lose the left. If they go too far to the left, they'll lose the centre to Liberal Democrats, and maybe a few of them to what may be left of the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party have got this dilemma: do they go and try and be Reform and either merge with Reform or compete with Reform, or do they adopt the centre-right ground and be old school Conservatives and say Reform suck?
And as you say, there's a lot of traditional Labour voters who will be bleeding out to either Corbyn's radicalism or to Farage.
Yeah,
they'll be bleeding in both directions.
Because Labour have essentially become a centrist party, and that is very hard to energise people with centrism. So, you know, because
especially technocratic centrism, which is
you're not going to
fairly anodyne.
But actually, I'm in a position now in my life where I'm like, give me technocratic centrism, where I'm like, I just want sensible foreign policy. I want acceptance of climate changes happening and at least trying to do something. You know, you're more likely to do something. You're not going to get, the Green Party aren't going to get in. Can they inform the debate? Yes, to a degree. But like, you're not going to light people up with centrism because you're not burning anything down. Like the far right, we're going to rip it all down and start again, and we're going to get rid of all the institutions. The far left, we're going to rip it all down and power to the people. And I'm left thinking, well, actually, you know, let's be a bit sensible. So I'm becoming, I think, more and more centrist. I have a left leaning centrism, but you know. Yeah.
The only silver lining possibly is, as long as they don't screw things up, there are a lot of people who are going to be in absolute despair at the chaos they see and may flee to the Liberal Democrats. So we may see them incrementally increasing their not just share of but share of the seats as well,
I
probably
think Lib Dems do quite
disproportionately.
well.
Because the extreme parties are not necessarily going to be able to, in first past the post, get over the line. They're going to disrupt and really shake things up, and that might work to the benefit of the Lib Dems.
It's going to be fascinating, but it's all going to come down to narratives and who controls the internet. And Elon Musk, I don't know if you've seen on Twitter, but the last week Elon Musk has come back and he's now full on anti-UK and full on pro-reform.
I haven't seen any of that.
He has gone, and if people are going to be existing online more and more, which they are, then you are going to get more and more, like you said earlier, the internet is responsible for the rise of populism. You are going to get the far left and the far right in the UK trying to have this big online battle to wrest the narrative away.
Hasn't Musk also moved away from the idea of creating a party from scratch? Because
he's funding JD Vance now.
He's funding JD Vance. I mean, either he's realized that everyone loathes him and he's going to have to work through a proxy who's got slightly more charisma than him, although describing Vance as charismatic, of course, is something fairly ludicrous in itself. But no, I mean, this and if one's going to be conspiratorial, behind the scenes, there may be other forces that are saying, hang on a second, you guys have got to stop. You've got to get your shit together, because, this authoritarian loose alliance, as it were, of it is a kind of international, isn't it? Because you also have the, is it the RFD in Germany? I forgot that, right? Or AFD. AFD, isn't it? I mean, you do have a loose authoritarian alliance taking place, and I'm sure you have the sharing of technique and ideas, and you have these sort of loose blocks whenever they do break through and have a presence in legislatures. So it is worrying that they're uniting, whereas the democratic forces seem to be as disjointed as ever.
Thank you very much, Michael Butcher, for gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Really, really kind of you. Thank you to Goose Springsteen again. JP, you don't need to be politically engaged to feel alienated in your own home. Kind of mass immigration post 1997 has disproportionately impacted the working class. Likewise, everything disproportionately affects the working class, really, in terms of most policies that exist these days. Likewise, asylum, hotels, HMOs. I mean, the thing is, you had Robert Jenrick, a conservative, actually running for conservative leader, was in 2022 on TV saying what a wonderful job he had done of opening all these hotels, and he was going to open more. So 400 plus hotels that they had opened, and they were singing the praises that they were spending government money on doing that. And now, 3 years later, because they see Labour getting hammered by reform, they're like, oh, yeah, just close the hotels. I can't believe the hotels are open. It's like, you were the one that opened them. You were literally on TV saying what a wonderful job you've done. You're going to open more.
He's such a knob. I mean, he really is, excuse the language.
So, like, what annoys me is that there's this kind of like, everyone loves to attack Starmer and Labour because they're easy targets, because they don't control the narrative and they don't control the mechanisms of messaging. Because
they fight back in the way that it's like being mauled by a incontinent sheep. They don't have the fight in them.
No, but they don't control any media other than vaguely The Guardian, but really no, because they do as much attacking Starmer as anyone else. The Mirror, sort of, but generally, if you look at print media, it's like, I always list about 8 newspapers that are right wing. There's 2 newspapers that are left wing. If you look at the TV news, Sky News and BBC have to be like both sidesist, and Sky News are broadly centrist. But then you've got GB News and Talk TV that are avowedly right wing, Fox News wannabes. And so there's no left wing TV news station. And the control of the internet, Elon Musk controls the platform of Twitter, Facebook, the algorithms, Zuckerberg's moved to copy Elon Musk, and so the whole landscape favors the right, and Labour are just going to be tonked no matter how well they do. The thing they have to do is sing their successes as loud as they can. And they've not done a very good job of that, because actually most people don't realize that they've actually done quite a good job of reducing a load of immigration stats. But because there's been all this flag stuff going on, everyone's saying how terrible it is. But actually, they've improved it from where they inherited from the Conservatives. But how many people know that? Not enough.
Whenever they do talk about it, they seem to sort of fudge the tone because they don't seem particularly comfortable talking about it.
Yeah,
then the liberal media savages them for
for not being like nice enough about exactly.
So it's like a no-win scenario.
They can't win because if they're hard on immigration, the left goes, "What are you doing being hard on immigration?" So they lose their left voters, and then if they don't do that, everyone else goes to town on them because they're being soft on immigration. So it's a complete no-win. I feel really sorry for Labour in terms of as in they just don't have a hope in hell of trying to drive a successful narrative. I don't think
it's a terrible own goal because they're creating the environment for all the whack jobs to come to the fore.
Or are they creating the environment, or
the media are helping to enable an environment where it becomes possible? I know, so you need a bit of nuance there, but.
Putin puppet now. Russian disaster across thousands of Russians surrounded Scruffy Tails war zone. So I've already plugged Scruffy Tails. So that's really great, Putin puppet. Thank you for the support as well yourself. And please go and support Scruffy because he's a great channel and a good guy. So before we go, and this is relevant for both of us because I think you're involved in this as well, my good man. The campaigns for Car for Ukraine. Is that correct?
I will be. I haven't yet launched it, but I will be doing that. I probably won't be driving across for you guys, which will be...
No, we've had to put that back, but due to loads of unforeseen circumstances that have popped up. So
when's it planned for? Is it up in the air now?
It's up in it. I'll contact you on behind the scenes.
Yeah,
give you a special handshake.
I do need to launch a truck campaign because I don't have a current campaign. I do have. This is quite exciting. I do have the opportunity to. I've been nominated as a media partner for Brave One. So
wow.
Yes, that's exciting. So I'll have the opportunity to do some rather spectacular interviews there. So that's my plan now, is to head across for that. And then, of course, you have the infamous Mr. Sweeney's Vladimir Putin Do-Off Festival. Excuse the expletive. That's on the 4th of October.
Where's that?
Kyiv.
Oh, nice. So David Sengelman, can I just thank you, David? 2 sets of 522 euros there. You are an absolute legend. Thank you. And thank you to all the people on the donor wall. So that's why it's popped up 1,000 today. What a legend. Mr. David Sengelman, who is vying to be one of the legends of the universe, not the multiverse. You can't have that. That's mine. So please pop along to Car for Ukraine. It's linked in the description below. Make sure you're on the ATP Geopolitics one and not anyone else's, because we want it to go through to us so we can have some lovely ATP Geopolitics trucks going out to Ukraine. I've got loads of video and still images of previous Car for Ukraine stuff with ATP Geopolitics stickers on and whatnot that I haven't shown you yet, guys. Ivan has sent me some stuff. I need to put that together. Anyway, so yeah, please help out with that campaign. Cheryl is giving some love to Scruffy Tails, so please do that. And also Cheryl, because she's such an amazing human being.
I need to jump on this actually because I'm not on the leaderboard and I haven't launched the campaign yet. So I'll reach out and we'll get that going. But also it's a nice excuse to do more live streams with you because they really do seem to, whenever we do a live stream, it really pushes the total towards conclusion. Although I did do a truck one earlier in the year and managed to close out a campaign for 69th Sniffing Brigade, and of course their trucks are a wee bit more pricey at about 20,000 euros.
Yeah.
But we did manage to cover a truck, so I think the channel is and the audience is incredibly generous, and this time I'll go for 2 trucks. I don't know what's your target. You're going for
just 2 trucks, yeah.
Just 2 trucks, yeah.
I mean, it's
I'll
sort of
do
thing.
the same,
If it suddenly takes off, then you can just add a truck or whatever. So
Yes. Yeah.
But I know it's a long time into the war. People have given an awful lot and regularly do so, and so you do worry about exhausting people's goodwill. But it is what it is. People can if they want to. It's no one's forcing anyone. So
I think we have to push it at this point. I mean, you and I know what the impact of these things are and the life-saving aspect of it. So I think we can unashamedly push on that.
100%. So Karen Spanuk, good Canadian viewer. JP, no tea tonight. I did at the beginning. I finished it. I finished it while showing you a clip of the rest of politics. So I did have some tea, but I have put out enough for one day. This is correct. I'm really sorry. I do apologize that I put out too much content and people feel obliged to watch it, and then they're like, what am I doing watching JP for like 5 hours a day? I've got a life. Surely I've got other things to do. But like I said, I've explained to you so many times before, guys, that I collect all this information, and then I don't know if I've got some kind of condition whereby I then have to get it out there and share it with you, and I just otherwise I can't exist. So so it just turns into
I
more
stream,
and more content.
therefore I am. Yes.
So we've got my partner's daughter is living with us in the spare room, and she had a baby 9 months ago. And that baby's at the stage where she's being fed like solids and whatnot, and she just kind of makes these noises. She just goes quite often, just like, I'm like, do you know what? She's just making that noise because she doesn't have the words or anything. So, but it's just, she just wants to express something. Do you know, when I do that, Sarah, I just do a live video. I just go and do a video. I'm like, I've got words. They've got to come out. So my kind of is this, just like an hour of like. Anyway,
I won't compare it to any other bodily functions, but
yeah, it's I'm just verbally excreting. This is what is going on. Yeah, and I'm sorry, Christopher. So I can't quit you, ATP Geopolitics. I have Paul Good, Deborah. So I've got no life. We have a life together, everybody, and it's wonderful. And can I just say, as a final kind of parting gift, it's taken a long time, but I finally enjoyed a live stream with Jonathan Finks. So that's really nice.
It's been a while, hasn't it? But this is lovely. End of the summer.
No, but yes, I finally enjoyed one.
Oh, you finally enjoyed one, but you didn't enjoy them before.
No, they were more of a kind of, I suppose, about that.
God,
I just felt sorry for you.
He's begging me.
I felt sorry. I thought, he needs a friend. So, like, I know that you don't see anyone else during the day, and like,
I don't. I mean, it's
the only person you speak to.
I appreciate the charitable outreach for hopeless cases like myself, but
it's care in the community. I get
care of the community.
I get extra brownie points to the government. I think I get some kind of benefit, tax break for just helping you out, just doing lives with you. So
yeah, I don't know what it will be. I don't think they'll pay you in pounds sterling. I think it'll be in cabbages or something. You know?
Yeah, this is true. This is true. Look, mates. Thank you for doing this. Thanks for just dropping on last minute. You can do with this what you will. Whack it onto your channel, see if anyone gives a crap. Hopefully they will. And let's do this again. Because as Cheryl correctly says, we are indeed the dream team.
We are the dream team. And let's do it next week, and I'll get this Cough Ukraine fundraiser moving, and then we can sort of plug that heavily, and we can look to get a few interesting chaps on, like Rick and Sergei's been doing a lot of drone trips over to Ukraine. I think he's got a lot of information. He's done a lot of trips. He's got a lot of frontline. A lot of frontline insights. So I think we should get him on, as well as insights into German politics.
Yeah, cool beans. Yeah, let's do that. Awesome. Okay, we'll stay on the line, but thank you everyone else. Really appreciate your support. Thank you to all the super chatters. Goose Springsteen, thank you very much, mate. You are super generous. Hopefully I did justice to all of your questions, the myriad that were there. So thank you, matey, and thank you to all others too. But in the meantime, Slava Ukraini, have a look out for the Car for Ukraine campaign fundraiser, and thank you, Jonathan.
Slava.
Slava Ukraini.